In the shadows of medieval history lurked sinister methods of torment, where agony became an art. In a period filled with rich history and literature, these concealed devices of excruciating ingenuity etched a harrowing legacy. Amidst the echoes of screams, brutality reigned as a chilling testament to humanity's darkest inclinations. Were these devices merely tools of torture, or did they orchestrate brutal deaths? How far did the cruelty of these instruments truly reach? From brain oozing out of eye sockets to being eaten alive, you are not prepared for the 8 most brutal torture methods that make up the darkest chapters of medieval history. On number 8 we have the breast ripper, a torture device made from iron, often heated to shred off the breast tissues in women. But why did they use it? It is recorded that the instrument was used on women who had committed adultery and abortion. The torturer clamps its 4 claws over the victim's breasts. The device was usually heated to add more agony to this already horrific means of torture. As the torturer twisted and pulled the lady, screams echoed, mingling with the stench of burning skin. Survivors, if any, bore the ghastly badge of mutilation and were robbed of the ability to nurture their future children. Here's a bonus device, similar to the breast ripper, the spider. During the torture, this device was affixed to the wall, and the accused woman's breasts were attached to its claws. The accused was then pulled away, ripping off her breasts in pieces within a matter of seconds. Well, if you thought that was mind-blowing, the head crusher takes that phrase to a whole new level. This metal device that takes spot number 7 on our list featured a plate that sat below the victim's jaw. This was in turn connected by a frame to the head cap. Firstly, the scalp of the person was placed in a cap and the chin on a metal bar. Then the lever on the top was twisted, slowly pushing the cap down and compressing the head against the bar. The gap between the head cap and plate decreases, crushing the skull, including the teeth, mandible, and facial bones, and ultimately inducing death. The head crusher is as gruesome as it gets. A disturbing ancient record described how the eyes of the punished popped out of their sockets. Further, the victim's brain would seep out of the eye sockets. Even if the torturer stopped before death, permanent damage to the facial muscles and structure would have occurred. To aggravate the pain, the torture master would sometimes amuse himself by tapping on the metal cap with a small hammer. Many variants of this instrument existed, some that had small containers in front of the eyes to receive them as they fell out of their sockets. The worse the crime they have committed, the more slow and painful the torturer will make their death. Medieval ingenuity didn't stop at skulls. They went knee-deep into innovative torment. That brings us to the torture instrument number 6, the knee splitter. Constructed from 2 wooden blocks housing around 20 spikes each, connected by sizable screws, the knee splitter was used for crimes not warranting death. The victim's leg would be placed between the metal teeth of the device, which were positioned in front of and behind the knee. The screws were then tightened, forcing the blocks together and crushing the knee. While its name suggested a sole purpose, this tormentor extended its reach, targeting elbows, arms, and lower legs, leaving victims crippled or at risk of fatal infections. As the torturer turned the handle, the claws slowly pressed against each other, mutilating everything in between. There were many variants of this instrument. The number of spikes in the knee splitter varied from 3 to more than 20. Some claws were heated in advance, intensifying the agony, while others boasted numerous small spikes that pierced the flesh gradually, drawing out excruciating and torturous pain. Torture devices weren't solely for inflicting pain. Often the cruelty served to displace the might and dominance of the enemy. Introducing torture device number 5, the thumbscrew, a device that would cripple you, potentially maim you, but most brutally leave you alive so you could tell your comrades all about the enemy's power. Thumbscrews, likely originating from France, were crafted from steel and served as tools to extract information or force confessions from prisoners. And the method involved placing the thumb between the screw and a metal plate, tightening it to a point where extreme pressure could crush the thumb into a bloody mess. Prisoners sometimes faced suspension by their thumbs, enduring this torture before more agonizing methods like the rack used for stretching and breaking limbs. Though numerous grisly practices existed, the simplest tortures proved most effective. Despite its basic design, the thumbscrew was remarkably efficient. Often small enough for just one thumb or big toe, variations allowed for all 5 fingers or 10 toes to be confined. This instrument, though modest, carried immense torment, leaving a harrowing mark on those subjected to its excruciating grip. On number 4, we have the heretic's fork, another straightforward tool designed to inflict intense pain without fatal consequences. The heretic's fork, a tormenting tool from the Spanish Inquisition, was a metal contraption resembling a fork with twin sharp prongs at both ends, positioned between the victim's lower jaw and breastbone and secured by a collar. Its prongs pierced flesh but deliberately avoided vital points, prolonging agony without causing death. Its deceptively simple design ensured continuous suffering for the restrained victim, immobilized and unable to evade the relentless pain. The prisoners would try to tilt their heads back as far as possible, but all eventually tire out. After a few hours, muscles in the neck and shoulder blades would stiffen, and the back of the head would be in pain. And finally, they would lower their head in search of relief, but instead, the victim would be instantly met with intense pain. As the fork's prongs dig deeper, the careful length of the fork's teeth prevented instant death. Even attempts of speaking or merely swallowing one's own saliva would cause the fork to pierce in. The heretic's fork was used to get confessions and was accounted to be used during the witch hunts, which took place across Europe. Some witches were forced to wear the heretic's fork. Ever heard of combing being torturous? You would if that comb was made of metal. On number 3 is the iron combs, a device used for centuries to comb wool or other materials before weaving them into fabric. But in classical antiquity, these combs were sometimes put to a more sinister use: torture and execution. Essentially, it would be a bit like having a sharp garden rake dragged over one's skin, slowly scraping, tearing, and flaying the victim's flesh off. Famously, Croesus, king of Lydia in the 6th century BC, had an adversary scratched to death by comb. The Romans also used the iron comb as a torture device, including on several early Christian martyrs. Being scraped alive is painful, but can you imagine being eaten alive by thousands of creatures? The Persian method called scaphism did just that. The Persians' penchant for unspeakable cruelty surpassed all, crafting tortures of unparalleled horror and prolonged suffering. They devised a macabre apparatus: 2 boats stacked and pierced with holes to expose only the victim's head and feet. Bound within, the unfortunate soul lay supine, the boats bolted together, sealing their fate. A sickening routine ensued. Each day, a sickly mixture of milk and honey flooded his mouth to the brink of sickness, slathered across his face, arms, and feet. Left under the scorching sun, the sweetness lured a cruel host of flies, wasps, and bees to feast on exposed flesh, inflicting ceaseless torment. But the true horror unfolded within. The concoction, swelling his belly, produced liquid excretions, breeding a putrid nest of worms. These insatiable parasites infested his decaying flesh, leading to a slow, agonizing demise which makes this a worthy contender for the top 2. But the most torturous device comes with not just pain, but power. Everyone wanted the iron throne, but no one wanted the iron chair. If you thought being eaten alive was horrible, how about being cooked alive? Yes, you heard that right. The chair served as a twisted tool to extract confessions, employing psychological terror as its chief weapon. A victim, bound to another chair, endured the gruesome spectacle of someone else's torment, knowing their fate lay in confession or facing the same agony. The terrifying torture device featured hundreds of sharp spikes on the seat, back, arms, and legs of the chair. The victim was seated and sustained by the front bar of the chair, then by another vertical bar, while 2 rings fastened the ankles below. In the upper portion, there was a collar for the neck. A transverse bar was used to hold the hands, fitted at each extremity with a ring holding the wrists. Underneath the seat was a stove. The restraints were slowly tightened to force the spikes deeper into the skin. Additional weights pressed upon their legs and feet, compounding the torment. If the headrest had spikes, the victim's head was pushed against it. Death in this iron chair unfolded over days to weeks, the slow cooking of coals inflicting excruciating pain. As long as the spikes were still in their body, it stopped them from bleeding too much. Once the victim was pulled off the spikes, they would bleed to death. Those were all the brutal torture methods from the medieval times that we have in store for you today. Did we miss anything, or would you change the order around? Let us know in the comments. For more intriguing explorations like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe to our channel.